What began in June 2024 as a space to amplify autistic and neurodivergent voices has grown into something far bigger. A platform for raw, honest conversations about neurodivergence, disability, burnout, inclusion, mental health, and how our identities shape the way we move through the world. From the start, our mission has been clear: to go beyond the headlines, beyond stereotypes, and explore the real lived experiences that often go unheard. Over the past year, we've spoken with parents, professionals, educators, advocates, and everyday people, all united by a commitment to building a more inclusive and accessible world. But what's mattered most is the community. Those of you who listen, share, and remind us, finally, someone gets it. Thank you for being here. This is just the beginning.
Looking for authentic conversations that go beneath the surface? Tune in now to the Deep Dive podcast. Visit us at www.deepdiveau.net. That's deepdiveau.net. And follow us across your favorite platforms: YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and Facebook. Just search at the Deep Dive AU. Join us as we dive deep into stories of neurodivergence, lived experience, and creating a more inclusive world. The Deep Dive podcast. Conversations that matter. Stories that connect.
This is the Deep Dive podcast. And here is your host, Michael Coles.
Madeleine Jaine Lobsey is a neurodivergent leader, creative strategist, and founder of Wondiverse, a social enterprise creating a world where all neurotypes can thrive. With over 20 years of experience in transformational leadership, she has mentored change makers across government, education, and the arts. She leads national neuroinclusion projects, trains workplaces, and produces large-scale events that celebrate creativity and connection. Formerly General Manager of the A-List, Madeleine now delivers a federally funded arts initiative and hosts Aspects podcast at Different Brilliant. Named one of Dare magazine's top 50 Australians over 50, she's reshaping how Australia experiences neurodiversity. Madeleine Jaine Lobsey, welcome to the Deep Dive.
Thank you, Michael. I'm very excited to be here.
How does play function as a universal language to bridge diverse neurotypes and foster genuine connection?
Yeah, that's a really big question. So let me see if I can keep it as simple as possible. So I think if you look back to your own experience as a child, even if you were playing solo and not with others, that there's something about play that lets go of expectation. You know, there's no particular way you're supposed to do it. There's no particular way you're supposed to be. It's like a sense of discovery, trying things out, practicing. And then once you start playing with other people, even if you're not talking to each other and you're just sitting side by side, there's a breakdown of hierarchy, and actually it becomes like about a human connection. And a discovery even of ways to communicate. So for neurodivergent people who, you know, everybody's different, obviously, but for me, sometimes my thought processing is slow or jagged, or it's like it won't get together. But when I'm playing and I don't have to talk all the time, I find other ways to connect and interact with people that I wouldn't when I've got language as a sort of a barrier or a constraint to what I'm doing. And I think it's a place where people find a shared sense of connection.
Okay, so in what ways can play-based environments reduce social isolation among neurodivergent people?
Well, it's an interesting one as well, because there's a couple of things to it. I spoke to a neuroscientist, a friend of mine's a neuroscientist, and she was talking about her PhD particularly was on social isolation, not for neurodivergent people, but anybody. And she basically said to me that isolating yourself from other people is about the worst thing you can do for your brain, apart from hit it with something hard on your head, you know. Other than that, it's one of the worst things you can do. When you do connect with other people, it's like a restoration of your brain. All of the things that like endorphins and happiness and dopamine, you know, start to fire in your brain, and you get this sense of belonging. So whether you're even interacting with each other or not. You can just be sitting in the same room. The same thing happens to your brain. So for neurodivergent people who can often experience being left out, being different from other people, being isolated, not knowing how to connect with other people, play really matters, but it's got to be a particular kind of play that allows for people to be themselves and the way they want to play, not a neurotypical version of play.
And that's very important. So what role does neuroinclusion play in designing events that are welcoming to all brain types?
Yeah, so I've just spent the last year working very specifically on this, and I've been looking at I focused on arts and culture as a play space, like museums and theatres and galleries and that version of play. And I started to look at what are the constraints or barriers or things that are missing that would provide joy for neurodivergent people. And there's many things I discovered, Michael, but some of them are the stuff that we already know, and we know this from evidence, like, sensory overload can be a real issue, and we need to make sure that we're reducing as much sensory input as we possibly can, that there are many forms of communication, and often things like visual cues work really well for neurodivergent people. So there's the stuff we many people already knew about neuroinclusion. I discovered something else. When you really, really, really allow people to be and really meet them where they are and let them express themselves and participate in whatever way they want, the stuff that can trigger them, I don't really like that word, but the stuff that can trigger them doesn't. Because they've got this sense of freedom to be. They're not trying to mask. They're not trying to hide themselves. They're not trying to fit in. So if you can not just environmentally design spaces that will allow neurodivergent people to play, but train all the staff and the people that work at the event so that they can let people be themselves, it's far more impactful than anything else.
Yeah, and the demasking is so important for neurodivergent people just to be themselves and be authentic, and that's so important. So how can community-driven play initiatives like Lego building events foster intergenerational and neurodiverse collaboration?
Yeah, I feel like Lego is pure magic. I know there are people that like Lego and people that don't like Lego, but there's something about those bricks that are very sentimental, that people know that at some point in their life, it's very rare to meet someone who's never touched a Lego brick. And many people like to play with them. So what I see when I do big Lego play events is, if you can imagine the most diverse crowd you could possibly think of, like every age group, every cultural background, every gender, every sexuality, every faith, every neurotype. And when you let them play together, something happens. If you and I were playing together, it's like, what are you doing? And what are you building? And can we share that brick? And can I play with that? And so people that would never talk to one another or interact do. And that makes them feel connected, and then they feel free.
Okay, so in what ways does play contribute to the development of social and emotional skills across different neurotypes?
Oh, you ask tough questions, Michael. They're great questions, but they're really tough because they're complex. Look, I think if a human being feels safe, it's one of the best things you can do. If a human being feels like they are safe to be themselves, it's about as good as it gets. And when we make environments that are safe environments, people can start to learn the stuff like, oh, other people don't want to share their bricks. Oh, these people do want to share their bricks. Oh, that person's upset about that. Like, they start to discover all that human interaction through play. And it's not like when you go to therapy or when you go to school, and in a really direct way, they're trying to go, do this, do that. You know, if you want to connect with someone, you've got to look them in the eye, or if you want to share, you have to ask this. There's sort of very direct ways of teaching things. This is totally indirect. So I say to people, you know, when you discover something for yourself, nobody has to teach it to you again. You know, that thing of like, when you see something for yourself, like you go, oh, that's what balance feels like on a bike. And, you know, your parents might have said, sit on the bike, do this, do with your arms, do that, press the pedal. But there's this moment where you discover balancing on the bike. And once you discover that, nobody has to teach it to you again. And I think play allows discovery versus trying to tell people what to do.
Mm. So what neurological mechanisms underlie the human drive for social connection, and how does this play activate these systems?
Yeah, well, again, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I can tell you some really basic stuff. And that is, you know, we know that one of the things that a human being requires is dopamine, and dopamine is the hormone that basically gets you wanting to act and be part of something. Like, it doesn't actually necessarily get you to do it, but it gets you wanting to participate. It gives you a drive. We also know that oxytocin is like a bonding, or they call it the love hormone, a connecting, a love hormone, that is really important to a human being. And endorphins are the ones that are like the happiness ones. And when you play with someone, those things happen all at once. You know, you get an endorphin rush, you have an oxytocin, you know, burst out of being with another human being. That we know that what that does is it can regulate someone's emotional system. It can support with executive functioning. It can give them like that sense of reward through the dopamine, like I've achieved something, and all of those things actually really empower a human being.
Okay, so how does prolonged social isolation impact brain function, particularly in those that are neurodivergent?
Yeah, this is a big one. So like I said, my friend said it's like the worst thing that you can do, okay, is social isolation. So one of the things that will happen for a human being, and it's pretty common for neurodivergent people, is even if they are, let's say you and I are in a room together, when you're masking heavily, you might feel as much social isolation as you do as if you're alone in a room, because you feel so separated from people through the masking. And so what happens when you do that over time is all of the neuronal patterns in your brain that fire for connecting to other people, experiencing love, they don't fire. They're not running in your brain. So if they don't run for a long period of time, what starts to fire are all of the ones that are associated with depression, anxiety, disconnection from other human beings. And you do that, you know, apparently what my friend the neuroscientist said is if you isolate yourself for 3 weeks, you can do permanent damage to your neuronal patterns.
Okay, so can virtual and remote play experiences elicit similar neurological benefits as in-person interactions?
This is the coolest thing I learned, because, you know, a lot of people talk about too much screen time, don't be on screens. It's not good to just play that. You've got to be face to face. But actually, science tells us that, like right now, Michael, I'm experiencing an oxytocin rush, like a real sense of love for you. And you're way up in Queensland. I'm way down in Sydney. I'm only seeing your face on a screen. And I'm still having that same oxytocin rush as if we were in person. Now, I know people say it's more when you actually see each other face to face, but actually, if you are a kid or a person that loves playing computer games in the dark and you've got other friends online that you're chatting to, not even verbally, you're typing and chatting with, you can have the same connection experience as someone who loves to go out partying and dancing with other people in a room.
Mm. So, what is the significance of neuroplasticity in adapting social and play behaviors across different environments?
So, this is so hard. I swear I should have done my PhD in neuroscience for this one, Michael. But I can tell you from my limited experience with that and my lived experience, what we know about neuroplasticity is that it basically means your brain's form can change. They can form new pathways and new connections in the brain. And when you do something outside of what's familiar, okay, the moment you do something outside of what's familiar, then you can form a new neuronal pattern because your brain's going, oh, I don't know this one, and it creates a new pattern, therefore fundamentally changing your brain. And when you play with others, like if you and I played a game together, I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know how you're going to respond. And so I have to bring a sense of curiosity and wonder, and predictably things will happen that aren't familiar to me because I'm playing with you and we're different. And the moment we do that, I'm going to make brain alteration.
So, how does engaging in play influence the development of executive functions and cognitive flexibility?
Yeah, well, I mean, you probably know this really well, but we can be quite monotropic in our thinking, so we can be very fixed in a way of thinking and stuck with something. And often one of the things that can be challenging to regulate, or sometimes for me will even disappear altogether, is a capacity for executive functioning, which is all that processes and like the computer of our brain, if you think of it that way. And if that gets switched off, it's really hard sometimes to turn it back on. But one of the things we know helps and supports with, I guess, switching executive functioning back on is movement. And you'll often see neurodivergent people do love stimming or moving because movement will actually turn that part of your brain back on. And play requires movement a lot of the time. So as you're moving, as you're engaging with others, you're turning your executive functioning back on, and that's the power of it.
Okay, so what principles should guide the creation of play spaces that are inclusive of all neurotypes?
I would say the big thing is it's really important to co-design and talk to other neurodivergent people, other autistic, ADHD, neurodivergent people. I know we're focusing on autism and ADHD, and there's many other things that fit in the umbrella of neurodivergence, but I think I would talk to the people in that community and ask them. That would be a really important part. The other part would be prioritizing safety, and safety is often just knowing where to go. So, if you go to a venue and you walk in and it's the first time you've been there and there's no really clear signage telling you where to go, that's enough to cause distress. And then, sensory executive functioning can disappear, sensory overload can start. So things like the way you visually cue and do wayfinding and signage really matters. Then giving choice really matters. So, some neurodivergent people love noise. They want to be at the front of a mosh pit at in a nightclub with the loud noise. They're seeking that. And other people find noise really challenging. So if you can provide choice, like here's a place where if you want to go and be in the noise, this is great. Here's a place where you can go and be out of the noise if you want, as an example. And then the freedom to be. If you want to wear headphones, do it. If you need to bring a fidget toy, do it. That's all important.
Okay, so how can participatory design approaches empower neurodivergent individuals in co creating play experiences?
Yeah, I think, when I was a kid and a teenager growing up, I didn't know I was neurodivergent, but, looking back, I didn't ever feel like that my experience was valid or that my opinion of something really mattered that much or would have influence. So the moment you do things like co-design with neurodivergent people, you're saying your experience is valid, what you have to say matters, your contribution is critical and can make a difference. And what we know from all evidence is that the kinds of things we do for neurodivergent people actually are great for everyone, neurotypical too. So they then get to be like a leader, someone who's contributing to everyone.
Mm. So what role does sensory-friendly design play in facilitating inclusive play environments?
Sensory friendly design, you can say it a few ways. I like to call it universal design. And what I mean by that is you want to be thinking from who's coming to this place and what will their experience of it be like. And if you start with those principles, then you can start to look at things like the textures in the room. What, are all the seats hard? Is there a place where it's softer? What is the lighting like? Does it hit people directly in the eye? Are there a lot of smells in this space? Are there strong smells that you may not even change, but you could create a visual story and let neurodivergent people know that they're going to walk into a space that has strong smells. You can do things like turning off the hand dryers in a toilet so that they don't get the really loud noise. So it's really like walking around a space and trying to imagine. Ideally, you would have an autistic person with you doing it, but trying to imagine, what does it feel like to be here?
Mm. So how can technology be leveraged to create adaptive play experiences for neurodivergent individuals?
Oh, look, there's people that are really into this, and I again only know my limited bit, but technology can be a massive, advantage. When we first started doing things like social stories, which for anybody who doesn't know, that is where you create a visual representation to let people know what to expect when they turn up to an event, let's say, or let's say they're going to a doctor's appointment, what might happen at the doctor's appointment before they arrive. So when we first started doing social stories, people were literally cutting out pictures and sticking them on paper and photocopying them and giving them to people. And now in an age of technology, we can obviously do all of that digitally, and we can also really create cool live updated videos to go with it. So you could do them very simply for every single event that you do, rather than a generic, here's the Brisbane Powerhouse visual story. You could go, here's this particular event and what you can expect. So technology supports then you can use digital screens to keep updating the signage and the visual cues. And you can actually even use technology for communication. So many people use an alternative communication device like an iPad, and you can have staff on site that can interact with people via texting and typing in pictures on iPads. So there's a lot that can contribute.
Yeah. And in what ways can organizations like your organization, Wondiverse, influence broader societal attitudes towards neurodiversity and inclusion through play?
Yeah, I think, Michael, I just finished a huge project across 3 states. And the point of it for me was, it's really amazing how far we've come. Like we do things like relaxed performances, we do things like quiet hours at supermarkets and stuff. But I'm like, I want to go out into the world whenever I want, wherever I want, and participate. And organizations like mine are starting to move to the next evolution of not just empowering neurodivergent people at specific times in specific places, but turning every opportunity into a universal design opportunity so the whole community can play. So people like you and I, Michael, who may have been left out our whole lives, suddenly a part of everywhere we go and are fully included. And that's the kind of difference that we're making.
Okay. And last question we'd like to ask everybody here on the Deep Dive podcast is that if there's one bit of advice you like to give in 30 seconds or less, what would that be? And I've put you on the spot there. I'm so sorry.
That your experience really matters and your voice matters, and one person can make a difference at any moment just by authentically connecting with another human being.
And on that note, Madeleine, thank you for a fantastic interview today on the Deep Dive podcast.
Thanks.
To find out more, go to wondiverse.com.au or go to Wondiverse on Instagram